different. So we're going to play around with the tuner, and I'm just going to show you kind of the impacts on target, kind of talk about what I'm looking for and why I'm doing this particular test. So first thing to keep in mind, this is my 284. This is at 1,000 yards, and everything you see is with me having a center hold the entire time. So we're going to go through a bunch of targets, and you're going to see a bunch of different impacts, all in different places on the target. Everything is being done with a center X hold. Now, when I do this testing, I have a big bright orange sticker that I'll put right over the X, and that really helps me make sure that I'm having the same point of hold every time I pull the trigger. And this is strictly for testing the tuner through a pretty wide range. I'm not really taking into account, well, I'm not at all taking into account any kind of wind, but one of the great things about this test and one of the reasons I wanted to show you is because I mean, it was basically the calmest day I've ever tested there. It was 8 o'clock in the morning when we started. Well, a little bit later by the time we got set up, but we got there about 8 o'clock. It was absolutely dead calm through almost all of this testing. There was maybe I don't know, just a couple little like barely little wind coming through, maybe 1 or 2 miles an hour. But essentially, this entire test was done with no wind, which is really great, and it really helps show you a couple things about the tuner and what it does. Also, I just have it up here as we get started. You're going to see a total of 43 shots that were taken. Over those 43 shots, my ES was 28.8 and my average speed was 27.94. This is pretty good. This is what I'm looking for. This makes me feel like I've got a really good test on my hands. There's nothing that's out of the norm. This speed is right where my node should be for this particular load. The ES is well within my acceptable standard for this many shots. So let's get started. Now, you'll see up here in the right, if you look at the saved file, you'll see that there is a T and then a number. That number represents the tuner setting. I've also documented temperature and some other stuff here, but really what we want to look at is the T number, the tuner number. And then I know there's going to be some detectives out there that love picking apart my target or my videos. There is time stamping here. You will see some targets that are out of time order because I wanted to organize them in a way that made more sense for the video. So yes, most of these are in order, but you will see some time jumps back and forth. That is because I decided to test things in a different way at the time, but for the purposes of showing you, uh, I put them in order in terms of the tuner settings. So let's start out. Now, I did not shoot tuner 0 to start. In fact, if I jump forward, you'll see that at 8:22, I actually started with tuner 4. I forgot to put it back on 0 to start the test, and so I came back to do it after a few of them. But let's just start with tuner 0. Now, we can certainly look at group size. So size is going to represent group size, and then we have our width and our height, and then we have our mean radius. Now, as a rule, I am looking more at mean radius than I'm looking at group size. And what I'm looking for as I do this test is I'm looking for a range of tunes that give me the most consistent mean radius in the lowest numbers. Now, that may or may not correspond to actual group size, but at 1,000 yards, I'm looking at mean radius as my controlling factor here. So at 0 tune, meaning my tuner at this point is all the way against the shoulder of the barrel, I have a group size just under 6 inches and a mean radius of 2.1. Now, my goal at 1,000 yards is to be under 2 inches on mean radius. I will accept something right around 2 inches, but as a rule, I want it to be under 2 inches. And for a group size, if I am using that as an indicator, I want it to be half a minute, so 5 inches or less. So starting out with 0, this one's just a little bit above what I would consider acceptable. So it's a little over 5 inches and a little over 2. Now let's go to tuner 4, which this tuner setting has been very good for me. This is sort of where I've done a lot of my shooting lately. It's sort of a known number on this load for me at this point with this barrel. And you can see it's much better. So if we go from 0 to 4, you can see that my group size went down to 3.48 and my mean radius is 1.58. So this is very good. This is what I would consider very, very acceptable. This is a load that I would not have a problem taking to a match. The other thing to keep in mind, these are 3-shot groups, and I really did not do any verification, and that is on purpose. I was just trying to get a range of tune settings so that when I go to, I've got a huge match coming up in Tennessee next week. I wanted to have the widest range of tunes with the fewest amount of rounds so that when I get there, I sort of have an idea of where to start my testing when I do kind of a quick tuner test there. Now, 4 has been very good for me. It was good for me at Rattlesnake. In general, it shot pretty well for me at Douglas Ridge, but I do feel very confident that this is a good setting. Then what I'm going to do is, in order to save components and time, I'm going to be jumping 6 numbers on the tuner, and I'm looking for a couple of tunes where I have a kind of the widest node in that tune. So if I go to tuner 10, okay, you can see we go from 3 point, almost, we're going to kind of do some rounding just to make it easy here, but 3.5 and 1.6, and then we're going to go to 1.7 or 1.8 and a 4-inch size. So not a huge difference, but notice the difference of impact on target, right? Now, at the end of the day, that's not a huge deal when you're looking at an individual test like this. But what this tells me is that even though the group sizes are the same, there is sort of a little bit of a treacherous gap between 4 and 10 where I'm getting a pretty good shift in point of impact. Now, at a match, that's important to know because let's say I'm shooting on tuner 4 and for whatever reason, because the humidity, temperature, whatever it is, this isn't shooting. And I go, well, tuner 10 was shooting pretty good too. Well, I have to recognize that's probably a 3/4 minute shift. If you look, I'm right at the top of the X ring and I go above the 10 ring. That's probably a 3/4 minute shift in point of impact. So I can't just, you know, take a center hold and go for it. I have to know that there's a difference. And I don't really like having a tuner node that has that big of an impact on target difference. So what I'm going to really look for is I really want to try to get to a point where I've got a wider node and very similar point of impact. And that's going to tell me that's a much more stable node. Okay, so we go from 10, then we're going to go to 16. It starts opening up and getting vertical on me. Still, not horrible mean radius or group size, but the orientation tells me that this is opening up. Then we're going to go to 22, still has a verticality to it, right? So you can see both of these big shift in impact on target, big and both very vertical compared to these, which tend to be more of a rounded group. Then we start, so this one starts getting the vertical just a little bit. This one gets the vertical. This one holds the vertical. So this whole range is out. Now, if we go to 28, it comes back in a little less vertical, still a good mean radius, still a good group size. Then we go to 34, it starts tightening up even more. Okay. Then we go to 40 and it really tightens up. Now, you'll see there's a shot that's circular here. I hit the stock on this one. I will not, I don't care if the flyer is all the way at the bottom of the page. I will include it unless I know I did something. And in this particular case, through the string, there were a couple times where I did something and I know that I impacted this shot. Now, for fun, I went ahead and included it in this frame just so you can see the difference. So it goes from a 2.38 to a 4.97 group and from a 1.15 to a 1.56 mean radius. But in this particular case, I know I impacted that shot. So I took another one and this is what I got. So we went from 34, which was really good, to 40. But again, big shift in point of impact. Then we go to 46, right? So here's 40 and 46. Now, what you see here is a very similar point of impact. The mean radius goes up quite a bit, right? But notice how there's a very similar point of impact between 40 and 46. So that's something that you want to take note of, and it's something that I would potentially test further when I'm at the range where I'm doing my match. Now, I didn't go beyond 46 because 46 is almost 2 full revolutions on the tuner out. I really don't go much further than that. I don't like going beyond 1 revolution if I don't have to, but I wanted to go 2 full revolutions or almost 2 full revolutions just so that I had the data. And, this tells me that this is actually looking a little more promising. Um, and I actually don't mind. There's a difference in impact here, which has me a little concerned, but we're going to test this a little further. So now what I'll do is this is 37. Okay, so we maxed out at 46 here. We went back to 37 and we shot this group here. Now, if I go to 34, 34 was right here. So let's just call this 10 o'clock on the 10 ring. Okay, and then if I go to 37, I'm at 11 o'clock. So roughly the same point of impact zone here. I went from maybe a 10 o'clock average to an 11 o'clock average. But that tells me that between 36 and 37, it's pretty stable. And then I tested 38 and a half. And so you can see between these, very, very similar. And if I look at my mean radius and my group sizes, I'm really happy with these. So what this tells me is this range, so let's say 37 to 38 and a half, almost 40, is really good. This is all coming off of what I would say is 11 o'clock. So if I go back now to 40, 40 is coming off at maybe 11:30 right in here, right? So as opposed to 34, which was down here on 10. So between 34 and 40, it's all right here in this impact zone, which makes me feel really, really confident. Okay. Now, I also went back and tested 5 because I know that 4 has shot historically well for me. But the difference, if you remember, between 4 and 7 was a pretty big change in impact on target. So I went back and tested 5. Again, this one was something that I impacted. I did leave it on there just to show you. But those were the 2 shots where I know I impacted my shooting. So there's that group. And then we have 7. Now, 5 and 7, notice how they're very similar in their point of impact on target. And again, that's very reassuring. This is a larger, if I go to, if I go here, this is basically just under 2 on the mean radius for a 5-shot group, which is great. And it's all right here at 9 o'clock. And then if I go to 7, I came out a little bit, but it's still all essentially at 9 or maybe 9:30 and also very good. So what this tells me as I go to Tennessee is that I have 2 ranges that I should feel very comfortable starting a test with, and that will help minimize how many shots I need to take on target when I'm there. 1 from a barrel life standpoint, 2 from a component standpoint, and 3 from a maximum efficacy standpoint. So I'm going to be testing somewhere in the 5 to probably the 4 to 8 range realistically, but 5 to 8 range. And then also as we looked back here, somewhere in the 37 to 40 range, 36 to 40, somewhere in that range is what I'm going to be looking at. So that's what I'm really looking at when I do this testing. Now I will show you something interesting just kind of in real time. But let's go back to this one's hard to see, but let's start with tuner 4. Okay. Now watch the point of impacts as the tuner is turned. And again, keeping in mind everything I've done at this point is all with a dead center hold in a near windless situation. So watch the difference in impacts as the tuner goes. You ready? Okay. Now we're going to go backwards. Notice how it makes a circle. It's pretty interesting to watch, right? So as you're changing your tuner setting, you're also changing your point of impact pretty considerably. And the thing to really take away from that is that it really helps you understand how a tuner is affecting the barrel harmonics when you can see it like this. And it also helps you understand how important finding point of impact nodes are relative to a tune, whether that's seating depth, whether that's powder charge, however you're tuning your load, making sure that you have corresponding point of impacts within that node is really important. So you're looking for replication and you're looking for similarity on point of impact. So anyway, trying to keep this video nice and short, not trying to get too deep in the weeds, but I think this is a really great visual representation of how a tuner can help you really narrow down loads or nodes within a tuner range so that you can get the most out of it. So Again, as always, appreciate you guys watching. You have a good one. We'll talk later.